And welcome to LiveONETV. I'm here with James Ford, and he's an independent media artist here from Brooklyn, New York. Welcome to the program, James.
Thank you, Ian.
Tell us what we're talking about today.
Well, thank you for the invite to the studio.
Not your first time.
Yes. And, well, I appreciate the work you've been doing, and thank you for the invitation to the conversation. Because I guess I feel the conversation is important. That I guess my understanding of, we live in a time of prescribed suppositions, and our narrative is heavily controlled, as you're aware of. You're a voice that's out there that is bringing information to people that they're not readily available in the mainstream media. So for me, I spoke to you about film, yeah. But you were good enough to say, let's get together, we could have a conversation. And for me, the small work I do, I try to do impromptu conversations. As an artist, I got involved with, I started a small series called Hitting the Bricks. Welcome back to Hitting the Bricks. I'm in the Lower East Side, coming down to where St. Mark's Theater 80 used to be. And I saw some of the magazines here, The Shadow, and the quality paper is great. So I said hello to Chris, and he was good enough to take a moment to say hello. What's up, Chris?
Hey, James, how you doing?
So what's going on, man?
So today is Printed Matter's third Zine Fest.
Cool.
And featuring a million, well not a million, but hundreds of self-producing, self-publishing artists, writers, zine makers, newspaper publishers, like us. And it's wonderful.
I had a performance, and I said, well, how could I bring people to my platform? It was a short solo performance I was doing called Stupefied. And I said, how could I started a website, first time I ever did that. So I said, how could I bring people to the platform without prostituting my work? So I said, okay, what could I offer of value? So what I've been trying to do is, how could I exchange value in a time when our economy is geared by leverage? So I created this series called Hitting the Bricks, where I just had a camera, because I'm a, fringe filmmaker. So I had equipment and I wasn't using it. So I took an audio box and a camera, and I went out talking to people. So the idea was, what would you like? What do you have to say? So Hitting the Bricks was just meeting people randomly, having an impromptu conversation, and what would you like to speak about? Whoever I had bumped into would like to have the conversation. So in that, topics would come up that weren't necessarily steered by the current narrative, and that was the goal. So for me, as someone who that is hoping to have a space for conversation in which we can get away from the prescribed suppositions of the narrative of how the conversations we are geared to have, that perhaps through just conversation itself, we'll come to whatever the point is that whatever the to the point of conversation that I guess is important at the moment, or not steered. And I babbled that up a little bit. Yeah,
I like that, because I feel if you are watching the media and looking at your phone, we're sort of being told that the conversation, the flow of conversation appears to be controlled by some companies that are running the social media.
Certainly.
When people actually, as you described, go and talk to them, have something different that they sometimes want to talk about, and there's actually another narrative than the one from the people running the big media companies.
Absolutely. And and it's not. Another thing I try to do is I try to place principles before personality in my own life, just to free myself up of being an ass myself and trying to a better way of engaging with my fellows. So in trying to do that, we see that like we were just saying, people are so busy with life, they're so caught up. It's hard for them, and normally when you do get in a conversation, it's not that they just haven't had time to do some research of primary sources, of gone outside the box. They just have maybe caught something in the car on the way to work. And a lot of times, a lot of our politics are geared towards economy, rather than coming from the principles of the Declaration of Independence, of freedom, that people don't even understand we have. So they really, like, I understand what it is. I come from a working class background. I'm jumping around, but it's like, and a lot of people are like, okay, what's my stance? Well, how did I get work this week? And then maybe I got into a union. How did I get into a union? Who's the union? So a lot of that is geared towards what are the talking points of how we're making money. We're going to put bread on the table. And in the past, that was not necessarily bad. But it seems we've got to the point where that's been so leveraged that people's talking points, they haven't even put time into put them on a table to say, are these aspects, what are these aspects? Do I really understand what this is about? Or is it just, no, blah, blah, blah said, this is what we got to do. We got to do this. And it seems in the past, maybe who knows how long ago, it may have been good for those communities. But where we are now, people understand the dynamic. It seems like people who are power brokers or players understand the dynamic of that chain, that scalar chain of leverage, and know those people are just acting from that. And so people are just regurgitating talking points. And it's very easy to put us up against each other. You know what I mean? So for me, you given this opportunity, having this space and open up, it gives us a small opportunity, I think, and which is important, to have conversations that are outside the box. And maybe even point people to directions that, okay, we are in this situation that, you know, these relationships may have been good in the past, but they may not be serving us at the moment, especially in the current economy. Because we are at a stage where they have called out the fourth industrial revolution. And this is not something that is fancy. This is people who aren't aware of the World Economic Forum. They have already. We're in the midst of, we're in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution.
Klaus Schwab, he wants to be the boss of the world.
Yeah. Well, they have him in place of, he's sitting at the head of the World Economic Forum. So that's a pretty, it's a boss amongst,
Yeah, when those two reporters not cornered him, actually they were very polite to the president or CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, when he was in Davos.
Yes.
There were two reporters who walked alongside of them and managed to put really good questions to him.
Yes.
And he had he wouldn't answer. He came across as really arrogant. Mm-hmm. And I thought those two reporters were excellent. These two guys who asked him about the pushing of the COVID-19 vaccines. Mm-hmm. And I think that Davos has lost its credibility in so many people's eyes.
Well, yeah,
the World Economic Forum, not the beautiful place of Davos. It's in Switzerland, I think, right?
Yes,
you have a chateau there?
Oh, yes,
okay. Yes. Come over for champagne,
no, I don't.
James.
Yeah. No, and I think you're right. But I think the truth of it is, like, most people don't know about Davos. I think Johnny Vedmore he's an independent...
I don't really know. It just seems to me a bunch of wealthy people got together and started redesigning how the whole world should be.
I don't think a lot of people, people like Whitney Webb and Johnny Vedmore and people like, some of the independent media artists, independent media have really brought it to our attention, I think, that Davos, Whitney Webb and Johnny Vedmore did a piece called Data Colonialism and Data Colonialism and I'm forgetting the other term, but they break down Yuval Noah Harari's speaking to Davos, and we're talking about the elite of the world, right? And he tells the elite, he says, this is the formula for the future. He says it's B times C times D equals AHH, and he goes, and it means biology times computer data times B times C times, biology times computer processing times data equals the ability to hack humans. Now this isn't sci-fi. This is Noah Yuval Harari in front of the Saudi monarchy, all of the elite of Europe, of the world. And this is the proposal that he says is going to be the formula of the future.
Who is he?
He's a historian from Israel, but he is a part of the World Economic Forum. And his accreditation is maybe more than just historian in Israel, but he's certainly a spokesperson for the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the World Economic Forum.
I wondered why the FBI director, Christopher Wray, got on a plane and went to the World Economic Forum. I mean, that guy is really, he's got to be replaced, Christopher Wray. I mean, he's not only using the private jet of the FBI for his own personal vacations, he hasn't answered who the pipe bombers were and who Ray Epps is, and the massive surveillance that's going on that the FBI does in conjunction with other subcontracted groups. General Dynamics, to name one of them. And we know a little bit about that here, don't we, politics? Now, we had a little trouble with somebody from General Dynamics. It was cyber stalking us, but I think we got that one taken care of for now.
And, you know, this, I think this is, it's very important, cyber stalking. I mean, in the aspect that cybersecurity, and we're in a new age of this technology, it's been made very clear that the technologies surveillance have been used, and if we just, as we just broached, that Yuval Harari is saying that we're going to have the ability to hack humans. If there's Dr. James Giordano, I don't know, I sent you a few clips from his. He has a lecture at West Point, the Modern War College.
I did watch that.
The Brain, the Battlefield of the Future. He tells the cadets. Know these two acronyms, WMD squared and AAA. WMD squared mean weapons of mass destruction and disruption. He's talking about the mind. And AAA, access, assess, and affect. We're talking about the brain. And we were just briefly speaking before, and this was suggested that, you know, anonymity may be the spiritual axiom of the freedom of consciousness. That space of ours, I mean, when did it come? Who decided to make the decision that this technology was acceptable? And what I felt from the information, what I was seeing with Dr. James Giordano touring the country, was he was saying we have these weapons in play, this technology, because he calls it dual-use technology, where, I'm jumping around, but it's all related, where he says, you know, if we have a wounded warrior and we can use neural weapons. Dr. James Giordano is from Georgetown. He's works with the government. He's writing a lexicon for this technology with neural weapons. Just give you a little brief of who he is. He gives this lecture at the War College. So he's I just jumped over my own side, but he's touring the country, going to Rotary clubs, telling people this is the technology that we have. But in that is the supposition that this is okay. But I suggest, I feel that these are crimes against humanity. That space of your mind and your consciousness that we trample all over every day, in being, well, anyway, that's my, should not, this technology should not have the ability to engage with that.
It sounds to me like
which is taking place now, because pardon me, I don't mean to, because he tells the cadets of West Point, the War College, you will encounter the weaponization of neuroscience in your personal lives and in your careers. They are valuable, viable, and they are in play now. So he tells the cadets that these things are in play now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of people think the government should be protecting our privacy and stopping people from accessing it. It's back to having a warrant, if you want to use the old expression, tap the phone lines, but which really means today collect all of the digital residue and other materials that exist on a human being, and sharing it en masse, and also with foreign governments. And what the foreign governments and our own government does is they do predictive analysis.
Data analytics.
Yeah, not only do they know that you went and bought some things at the drugstore and that you picked up your broccoli at the supermarket, they also know your intimate thoughts. Maybe you wrote somebody a poem, or you wrote some concerns you had in the family, so they get a sense of the way you think. And they can put all this into an AI data bank and use predictive analysis about who you might like on social media, what type of videos you're probably going to share. And they can do this the same way that an explanation is given that the way the planets in their rotation with fairly good predictive analysis, we can tell where those planets will be in 5,000 years and 500,000 years. And we can also rewind that and say the position that planets were with a high degree of accuracy. And you put all this data into a super AI, and you can see how a ground movement of people could become a threat, who want to stop these kind of invasions of our privacy and interference with our lives. So that's what I think's happening.
Yeah, no, it's Dr. Robert Duncan, the MIT. He has a presentation. It's heavy duty. Neural weapons and targeted Americans. He's an inventor of this technology. It's frightening stuff, and this technology exists. He's warning. He apologizes. He says, "I apologize for putting this in the world." EEG heterodyning is one of the technologies. It sounds. There's a whistleblower, Richard Lighthouse. It's interesting. He talks about. I'm just trying to put it in perspective for people who haven't heard anything like this, because it sounds like sci-fi,
right?
But like he says, the crop circles. He says people were talking about these crop circles as if they were aliens landing, or he says actually what it is the satellites are calibrating. So they have the hairline precision in these satellites. And what he was suggesting is that the Star Wars program, he says in the beginning of the Star Wars program, the intent was they were going to have satellites that if the Soviet Union should shoot a nuclear missile at us, that these satellites with pinpoint precision could hit the warhead, and dismantle it as it was in flight. He's suggesting that they never scrapped that program. And he says, think about if they could hit a missile in the air, how hard would it be to track the back of someone's head while they're walking in the street?
Easy.
And he says, not only that, so you could have the satellite, but think about the training we've had also with cell phones. We put these things on 24/7 all around the world, and we have information, so with EEG heterodyning, it's like we think we go into an EEG machine, right? And they take skin. The danger is that they're saying they have the technology already. There's a group called there's a video, I think it's bigger than Snowden, that you could check this out. There's a lot of the people who are scientists who are more knowledgeable of this. I'm just regurgitating something I've come across, but EEG heterodyning is they could, with that technology, they can bounce a beam off the back of the head. It bounces up, and the other beam comes down and reads the information. So it's not that they're reading our soul or our thoughts. No, it's like fiber optics. Information. I know this is a lot of information, but a guy who was laying cable kind of brought this to my attention. He says, yeah, this is fiber optics. He says light travels through fiber optics. If we think of micro and macro, what happens in the synapse of our brain? So they're suggesting that since that information is moving at the speed of light, if it bounces, it could just read. It's just reading information.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, I know, but it's like this technology exists.
We've got a big fly that keeps on coming around the Capitol Mouse House today. I think I'm about to have my Mike Pence and Hillary Clinton moment any second. But
I guess to bring it down to, for me, it's solutions, right? Is getting back to basic principles that, it is the Declaration of Independence, as imperfect as maybe we have derived our government from it. It's supposed to be basically protection of rights, right? Constitution was penned to protect those rights, and we've gotten so far away from that aspect. And what I kind of came to understand is that we speak a lot about democracy and that we need to spread democracy around the world, but you can have a democracy derived from a corporate state, from their principles, and you're going to get a different vote than if we're having the democratic vote over principles of freedom and protection of rights. So we get so overwhelmed, and I, as myself, with all the BS of the day, it's hard for us even to get back to understanding that it is about our individual sovereignty, inalienable rights. We find these truths self-evident. All men are created equal, endowed with certain inalienable rights, separation of church and state, and why? Not because it's about God, it's because there was divine right to rule, and there was a monarchy, and there was a relationship between the monarchy and the King George III at that time. And the monarch said, I mean, the vicar said, the organized religion at the time said, I'm the voice of God on earth. I have no peer and no authority. And I've been told by God that the monarchy has divine right to rule. And they have dominion and a right and duty to subjugate nature. And we were their subjects.
Yeah.
And then we said, that is what we find these truths self-evident on its face. All men are created equal. That story, divine right to rule, that is a lie.
Yeah,
that is not true.
This means by birth that you have a different set of rights than the subjects have.
Yes, yes. And it's like public relations at its finest.
Yeah. Are you aware that one of Edward Snowden's releases that I've never heard discussed before, but I downloaded a lot of his documents 10 years ago. It was that long ago. And one of them is a photograph that comes from GCHQ, which is the British equivalency of the NSA. It's their bulk mass surveillance center, of which all Americans' data is shared along with other nations. They used to call it the Five Eyes. It's probably double or triple that now. But all this data, American data, is given over to GCHQ. And Edward Snowden released a photograph of King Charles inside of GHQ with Queen Camilla, with a bank of monitors around them, and he's there like this with a goofy smile on his face. You know, the very idea, and I'd like to say that I like studying royal history, and definitely I could, you know, study it more. I enjoy looking at books and films and videos. It's fascinating, and it shouldn't be destroyed. But the idea that the King of England has access to all of our private records, I don't blame England for it. I blame our own silly bunch of rodents who run Congress for allowing that to happen. And they just did it again last week with a bill called 702, has a lot of other names, the National Defense Authorization Act and so forth. I think that's it. And but there we are. You know what I'd like to tell all these tyrants of the world who just don't get it? They don't get it, but I try to give them warning. I give them warning like this. John, Paul, George, and Ringo. But they don't get it. But someday when we're all atomized, and you're in that giant cosmic, surrounded by it with John, Paul, George, and Ringo, you're going to think twice about what you're doing to other people. But I know maybe that's going to put me in the oddball circle. Good enough.
I don't know.
All right, what are we going to do about it? I mean, there's violent revolution, but we just go to jail if we even think or talk about implementing those kind of plans. I've had people who've actually wanted, you know, to get me involved in violent things, and I never ever do. You know, but I'm sadly at the point where I'm telling people I think we got to go back to the ballot box, learn who these people are, and then listen to their challengers to find out what the challengers' intentions are and have that conversation amongst us. And sometimes I've done that. We find a politician who's crap, and then we talk to the challenger and we go, wait a minute, the challenger is worse than the guy who's in office. Is there anyone amongst us who would run? You don't need a degree to run for Congress. You get $175,000. You get a parking spot. The place is also a museum. It has dining. It has a gym. It's not a bad deal for some people. You're not going to be, you know, a billionaire, but you can make that, if that's your dream. After you get out of office, you should have all kinds of skills, get into private industry. But what do you think we can do? I mean, I'm at the point where I think we need to focus on these 535 people, 100 senators, 435 Congress people, study, familiarize ourselves with how they vote, and listen to their challengers, and hopefully nurture people, in my opinion, who are liberty-minded, who believe in a very small, limited government that's involved in protecting people, and not this behemoth of a ballooning, crazy government that's...
As you know, we just said...
I'm just saying, what should we do about everything?
Well, I think, like, for me, from a limited perspective, I think any kind of honest appraisal is how could we put the things on the table to understand how we're participating? what is it that, like for myself, do I know enough about certain? I think what we really need is an understanding of the technology we use. We said briefly, consumerism. Not that it's good or bad, but there is, we're the...
That's the hot word. I want us to stay with this consumerism after you're finished. Excuse me, continue.
No. Well, if I would give you my perspective on, it goes back to Bernays, right? We have gone through a stage...
Goes back to what?
Edward Bernays.
Okay. Was he a scientist?
Some say he's the father of propaganda. He was Sigmund Freud's nephew.
Oh.
The suggestion is that when capitalism, and I'm just putting factors on the table. I'm not pro, this is just try to put it on the table to observe what the situation is for myself. The goal was for capitalism, initially when Bob had a shovel. Bob was selling shovels. You didn't know Bob had a shovel, so he was going to advertise his product. But you know what? Bob didn't make the best shovels in the neighborhood. Now you knew. You didn't know before. That was a way of advertising that was... Bernays, what Bernays did was he brought psychology into selling a product, and which pushed for we to identify with the external. So what we suggested, and you can go, Walter Lippmann is also, Bernays propaganda is, what I would suggest, capitalism, for it to work, you need to accumulate wealth to leverage, as a use of leverage. Now, before Bernays and the push for consumers, where we needed to create an environment where people, instead of just buying a shovel when you needed it, we needed to create an environment where people wants became needs. So this way they would go out and purchase when they could accumulate a bit of capital to accumulate. Then they would feel they needed. They needed the things that they wanted. And so now we've created a whole society, and where people who have maybe maintained that comfort of monetary, whatever you have, we've created a culture where people's needs are their wants. And I'll suggest that from the way I perceive it, to as a supposition for this conversation, like people talk about the word evil. You know, some say duality is two different things. Like I would say like hot and cold. People say they're two opposites, but really it's you're aware. Imagine like it's the presence or absence of energy. So it's really the same process. My suggestion is like people talk about evil and good. For me, regarding the human being, it's really how much do we serve our reactive egoic self at the expense of others? Because we all have our own things that we have. So we have a thing. So if we serve ourselves, that aspect of ourselves, at the expense of others to the extreme, we become evil. The less we do that, we are perceived to be good. So if we create a society of consumerism where we want to have people cultured so that their wants become needs, we're creating a problem for ourselves. And with the aspect of technology today, at the speed of light, fiber optics, I mean, that's one of my things with Bernays. We have come so far from that time period, to period now. Walter Lippmann said, you know, we need an elite class to control the bewildered herd. You know, and so it's, you know.
Yeah, right. But I was going to ask you, do you have any? No, that was great points, and I want to talk more about consumerism and wants and needs. It's great subject. And we don't need to talk about people actually voting. You know, I feel like what people need is a miracle. I don't have the miracle, and they need a better solution than what I'm suggesting, because to me it's like a cold fish in the face, you know, to say, hey, let's go back to the ballot box, because we've been burned for so long at the ballot box. But I mean a real scrutiny of the people who were in there, their voting record, and scrutinizing their challengers, and nurturing amongst us people who are liberty-minded. The same way baseball teams, you know, they'll try and find somebody when they're very young before they bring them into the major leagues. And there's already a lot of political groups who have claimed to be doing that.
Like the World Economic Forum's
That's
young
what
leaders.
It basically is, and the young leaders,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Huh.
Yeah, I think where we're at, speak for the common folk. We really need to understand the situation we're in, and try to understand as much of the fact, because technology is coming fast, and the Bank of International Settlements is looking to push forward the central bank digital currency. The Bank of International Settlements and the Federal Reserve already have a going direct program. People who are civil servants, that's one of the things I've been around a lot of people in my life, and a lot of the guys who were in civil servants, even Wall Street guys, they would be like, you know what, where the money's coming from is above my pay grade. That's why they get paid the big money. And then direct deposit came in, and people are more concerned about how much is the tax man taking money out, of how that money's coming in. But as we were talking a little bit earlier, is the Patriot Act, the Counterterrorism Fund, has it the yearly fiscal limit is there is no yearly fiscal limit on the annual budget of the Counterterrorism Fund. Not to judge whether it's good or bad, but how could any government agency have a capless budget? And so what happens is, now if we have Bank of International Settlements and the Federal Reserve saying we're funding every nation that has a central bank, then that opens up a door of problems. Like, okay, are we funding our civil servants anymore, or do we have a global banker or money interest really controlling levers of the country?
I think the latter.
Yeah, and if they're bringing in a central bank digital currency, like we were talking earlier about Dr. Shiva.
Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, 2024 presidential candidate, MIT, PhD, inventor of email. He was on the cover of Time magazine. Don't push me on this. He copyrighted the email system.
I mean, at the least, to have him in the pool of discourse is huge.
Right.
I mean,
and he's getting massively censored right now.
Yeah.
So I don't mind. Can we give a moment just to let people know? Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai is a 2024 presidential candidate. A couple of years ago, he ran against Elizabeth Warren. He was deplatformed by Twitter. He took the government to court and found out he discovered the backdoor into social media. He created an elaborate chart that named names.
Systems.
Federal agencies. He used a systems scientific approach that he was trained in, and he outsmarted these government people. And in a court, he actually defeated the government. He gave this information to Tucker Carlson. He calls Tucker Carlson Fucker Carlson because Tucker Carlson didn't do anything with it for 2 years. And then 2 years later, Tucker Carlson had the information. It took him 24 months before Tucker Carlson said, why isn't anybody covering this, with that little flippant laugh of his. So Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, you should listen to him. He's on YouTube. I'll just wrap up by saying that if you look at his followers, I think they call them subscribers on YouTube, followers on Twitter X. If you look at his subscribers on YouTube, it hasn't gone up one in 2 years. It's frozen, absolutely frozen in 2 years. And meanwhile, in the last month alone, he had over 1 million minutes of his videos viewed, and that's not bad at all, friends. Think about it. And over 100,000 views. 1 million minutes, over 107,000 views. So the idea that YouTube, which is owned by Google and Alphabet, would censor him, this guy who came over and became a naturalized American from India and is really bright, it shows what's happening to us. So yeah, you may not agree with Dr. Shiva, you may fully agree with him, but he is an exciting person to hear right now. Go check out his YouTube channel. And he's not the only one, there's a lot of others.
And he has years of research and study that he put together, systems research that he offers for free on his website. So and I think that's another aspect that we could do for ourselves, is understand what is common sense. People say common sense is simply the 5 senses common to all men. And we talk a lot about critical thinking, but we don't really understand what critical thinking is. It's like grammar, logic, rhetoric. Can I observe something, discern the information and put it out into the material world without it being screwed up because, you know, my own BS. So I think he's a person that understands systems in a way, and he puts it out in the world where we could all, like, we don't have to be MIT experts or PhDs to use our common sense, and to use, especially, you know, it was an interview with John Taylor Gatto. He used to be a school teacher. There was, Richard Grove did a great interview, The Ultimate History Lesson, where he said the reading level of the early, what I think Abraham Lincoln called them mudsill citizens, was very high because they were reading Latin and Greek. They were reading the Bible, and they could read Thomas Paine when he first came over at that point in time.
You're saying there was a high degree of literacy amongst
yes,
the educated.
Well, no, without what would consider the, you know, common people, or even before, yeah, they call it the mudsill. People who lived in homes that had mud sills still, like, you know, early America.
Wow. I still don't know what a mudsill is. I know people in Scotland apparently made homes out of mounds of earth. Okay, but what is the mudsill?
It was just because they were made out of the earth. So the windows would be made of it would be dirt, like however they packed them. I'm not really sure. Yeah, but probably like a thatched kind of house, probably.
Well, I think they used mud for even cabins at some point. You know, it wasn't cement.
I imagine,
picked up from Home Depot.
No.
Someone would find some cement that would. I don't know. I mean, some mud. Interesting, yeah, a high degree of literacy.
And I wanted to say, like, you know, you were talking about Snowden. There is a lot of great information out there. A lot of people online that have been suppressed. You were talking about Snowden, the NSA. William Binney is another person who was a whistleblower. It's a great interview. Richard Grove.
John Kieker. I think it's a Greek name.
There's a great interview with Richard Grove. He puts out a lot. I mean, he has an interview with John Taylor Gatto or William Binney. He's part of the autonomy group. Richard Grove, I can't talk about more, but William Binney was the head of the NSA surveillance. Well, I forget the proper terms, but he was one of the heads of the NSA, oversee of like the Stasi in the USSR. And he said that he was the person who wrote the code for I believe it was Operation Shoestring. I could be wrong. During year 2000, coming into 2001, and he at the time, the neocons at the time made the choice of I'm just saying whoever at the time, the party at the time, they could have used the Operation Shoestring, I think it was, where they could single out a bad guy and surveil. He says, no, they chose to use blanket surveillance. He says there's no way at the time they could have processed all the data coming in to take any actionable actions on that data at the time. He says, no, they just put in...
They were taking the whole haystack,
yes,
and not just trying to find the needle.
And he said that that's why he resigned. You know, he resigned, he said, because we were implementing the tactics of the Stasi. And he says, and
that's the East German intelligence wing that
yes,
brutally harassed its own citizens who were maybe thinking things differently than the government wanted them to. You know what, one of the worst things, I don't know if it's true, but somebody said, let me tell you about some of the low-level harassment that the Stasi was doing. They would, and this is... I wasn't there, so I don't know it, but I heard if they wanted to do low-level harassment, they would go into somebody's apartment and would arrange where some of the food, maybe the tea or cans of food was, just rearrange it a little bit and leave the apartment as just one of many steps to degrade somebody's sense of reality and
unfortunately,
identity.
Yes, they one of the terms they used to call was Zersetzung. Zersetzung.
Is that German?
Yeah, if I'm probably brutalizing the word, but the translation is decomposition.
Decomposition.
So what they would do is it was a way of, you would take a targeted person who wasn't going along with the party or wherever, maybe dissenter, and they would break their social relationships, financial ties, and the whole idea was to get them to go crazy, project have them deemed as crazy because you want to diminish their standing in the community.
Reputation.
You either drive them to insanity, to kill themselves, or get locked
violence.
up. Yes, or to violence.
For violence.
And unfortunately, I suggest that if people go to, I guess we're going to the area, but it's here. It's what's here today. We need to understand that Mussolini said, "What is fascism? It's a merger between the corporate state and between corporate power and the state." And we're in a time where these things are with the technology are in play, and it's suggested that COINTELPRO took on a lot of these tactics years ago, and today with the technology, Targeted Justice, Richard Lighthouse, who else is there? If you go to Targeted Justice, it's very clear that they are using some of these tactics today. All around the world. You were saying the Five Eyes. It seems like with the technology we have today, it's pretty scary. Catherine Austin Fitz, financial. She was in the Bush administration. She's been very outspoken about a lot of these things. She was targeted. She's part of this Targeted Justice website. The technology has gone very far to. They call it gang stalking. They have a manual, gang stalking manual. You could go to Targeted Justice and read the manual.
I will.
This is globally.
Where can I find it?
Targeted Justice.
Okay.
I think it's .com. They have the manual, but I would say they say the name is a little bit like, I guess that's in the intelligence thing. It's a little bit of a deflection. It's really a disruption campaign. And one of the things they do, which made me think of it, is they'll go into someone's home and they'll rearrange the furniture. Mm-hmm. Or they'll say they're surveilling someone who's a target. Because this is like, say, now in this day and age when they're trying to suppress the freedom of speech and they want to quell any kind of dissidence. One of the ways to do that is before, like with data analytics and predictive programming, if they could read someone on a computer and say, wait, this guy may be a problem just through computer data analytics, they could start targeting. And that's what's being suggested is happening today. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things they could do, as you suggested, is have the person perceive that they shouldn't be trusted. Attack their finances, so that you don't want to. You see someone going through a rough time. That's the last person you want to be like, or make them seem crazy, right. Like you should, and that's just the light stuff, That's not with some of the things that's happened with directed energy weapons, which is very serious, and these things exist.
Yeah, the Pentagon, the Department of Defense has a unit, according to the Intercept website, mm-hmm. where they troll social media looking for anything that might cause embarrassment to U.S. generals.
Sure.
So if you're putting up something there and saying, I think Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin III is impaired, not just because of his botched pullout from Kabul airport where 13 American servicemen were killed, not just because he oversees the slaughterhouse in the Ukraine and in Gaza, not just because he had surgery and didn't notify the Pentagon or the president for weeks, okay? If you put this kind of information out there, there is, according to the Intercept, an Army battalion that will start tracking you for doing it. So these people are thugs, they're gangsters, they hate our guts, they hate the Constitution. I'd like to say something we said, but not when we were recording. We were talking about why last week most of the members of Congress voted for reauthorization of the NSA's ability to conduct bulk surveillance, which means collect all your private records and store it in a government database and share it with other countries around the world. And then they can start doing their predictive analysis to find out what you're going to be doing with a high degree of accuracy, who you might make friends with on social media if you see their posts. Mm-hmm. And And we were talking about that just before we started recording. And I asked you, I think I know why they were able to persuade these elected officials to violate the Constitution and reauthorize it. And I'm going to imagine that I'm briefing you as a congressman or senator, and I've come in from the NSA, and I'd say, Congressman Ford, nobody respects the Constitution more than our intelligence agencies and the United States military. I took an oath to defend the Constitution, and it is the hallmark of our whole republic, and it's one of our cherished documents, and it is the supreme law of the land, as you mentioned earlier in a letter before this briefing. The reason we're asking you to vote for reauthorization, to violate all Americans' rights, is because we need to show you the 2024 context and world that we're living in. We have intercepted, because of this program, over 1,400 gang-related shipments of fentanyl into our communities and societies. 1,400. I'll make sure that your staff has those statistics. And that's because of these surveillance programs. We also have been able to intercept, and you'll see in the other documentation we've given you, 853 domestic terrorist incidents. It's crucial to save lives that we reauthorize this program. I'm pretty sure that's how those briefings go. But what they don't apply is what Dr. Shiva is teaching and sharing, which is a systems approach to understanding what has created, what factors created the environment so that fentanyl is coming into our community and killing our fellow Americans, what situations they've created that have made domestic terrorists so upset. And I put forward it's because of the policies of Washington, and their policies affect our biology, whether it's massive taxation, violations of the Constitution, the national debt makes absolutely no sense at all. And this is so demoralizing, it affects your own immunization, your ability to maintain your health. And so, yeah, I know why they're authorizing it. They're a bunch of unconstitutional traitors, and I mean that sincerely. And they're not looking at the bigger picture of why those conditions are happening. That's what I think is happening.
Yes, and I think it's business. And a lot of it...
Thank you for... We're going to get to consumerism, right?
Yeah,
that's right.
And I think, you know, I think... trying to just put it on the table, I think a lot, like I was talking to this guy, Michael Nimitz, he was a tank gunner with Iraq, and he went into contract, he was a contractor in Chicago, and he went to Mexico. He said that, he says, I'm tired of having a negative effect on the human race. He says, I want to try to do something else. And he talked to me a little bit about when he was in Iraq, like he had family in the Marines, like at that time when we started in Iraq, when logistics was being privatized, trucking. He was like, James, you know, he was talking to me about, you know, I mentioned that trucks, they were having runs, the private companies were doing runs in war areas that were dangerous with empty trucks. He says, James, they would have trucks and like stop, and when I was there, said they had a flat tire. He said they would blow them up with grenades, one, to protect the driver, but two, because they knew they didn't care. It was more money to go cha-ching, cha-ching, you know. So these, he says,
Halliburton operations.
Yes. So
Dick Cheney's company.
Yes. So, and when you know, it's like pump and dump. It's this idea of like stock markets. Get in, like it's even in New York. You know, I got to come in and make my money and get out. Go buy property out somewhere else. You know, we have this. It's part of how it's in the economy of how we're gonna make it, right? Yeah. Like I'm gonna come and I only have so much time to come in and make money. Say I'm a poor guy, you know, wherever I'm from, I go into the military. Why? Because this is what I have to do, because to make a living. It becomes a career. I get out, I go, oh, you know what? They know, the people, the industry knows. They know the guys to go, and they groom these guys to come out. And it's not a judgment that they eat. They're just, this is the economy we've developed around the military-industrial complex of career and leverage. And now with tech, and we're talking about the NSA. These are global tech companies. You look at, you know, there's a company, and talk about DARPA, and this is leaning on Whitney Webb. Thank you, Whitney Webb. She's just a lot of the information, the work she's done.
I didn't catch that.
Whitney Webb.
Oh, Whitney
she's
Webb.
done the work she's done. Like one of the companies, Welcome Leap. Regina Dugan was she was in DARPA, and she was out of the biotech, right? Data analytics. She's running a company called Welcome Leap, which is a combination of the Wellcome Trust, which is Burroughs from pharmaceutical success in, I believe it's the UK, but in Europe. And they have the biggest medical private grant fund. I think it's the Wellcome Trust. And they merged with Silicon Valley to create Welcome Leap. And talking about data analytics, they have a program, the third program is called the First 1,000 Days, where they're suggesting that they can do data analytics, reading a child's mind in the first 1,000 days of their lives, because they're already doing research in this area with dyslexia. So they're this is a few years. They're projecting that they could read in the data analytics the first 1,000 days projections of that person's behavior. How could we help them? How could we improve it so we can fix those problems in the future? Yeah. But it then makes me think of Dr. James Giordano talking about dual-use technologies. If we can give a wounded warrior back their sight, this is Dr. James Giordano, we could use the same technology to take that away. And that's what I think I jumped over. That's what we need to be aware of. All of the dual-use tech, all the digital technology and these neurotechnologies are being intended to be made with dual uses, and that's a danger that we're in, And I don't mean to go on, but that's like Peter Thiel. We spoke a little bit of Palantir,
right?
What they're doing with ICE. That's my concern about the border. If we're gonna we're talking about having a smart wall on the border, because what makes me think about Edward Bernays. I don't know if you're aware.
Tell me who he is.
Edward Bernays was the father of. They call the grandfather of propaganda of public relations. Here's one of the stories I like to rehash of cigarettes, the cigarette industry, right?
Yeah.
So initially, it was frowned upon for women to smoke in public. They went to Bernays and said, "Hey, Bernays, we got a whole part of the human race that aren't smoking our product. How can we get them in the game?" What Bernays did was, now think about this, right? This is industry merging with intelligence, really, right? And psychology.
Psychologists and intelligence.
Yes. So he goes, what Bernays does, and I'm not even sure he was intended to be but this is the mode of operandi, right? So Bernays does, he says, he hires 3 young, beautiful women in New York City. I believe it was either Easter or Thanksgiving Day parade. He hires 3 beautiful young models and a camera crew at the time. And he sets up a covert kind of happening, right? On a corner where the 3 young women light up, everybody stops on the street because the cameras are there. And then in the papers the next day, it was Torches of Liberty. And then think of how many people, how many women have died of cancer since that moment, right? Or think of the money. So there's another term, and it's right these days, the idea of anti-Semitism comes up just to broach an idea of, for me, the industry of maybe what's in Israel, which is at the forefront of cyber security. Hasbara. Hasbara is a term that they use that's really part of their public relations. It's a mode of selling data. And so it's not about, for me, like to speak about that, it's not necessarily about, what's the same thing with MI5, or we can go back to, anyway, I'm jumping around. Like even talking about that, I try to stay away from it being an attack on Israel, rather than there are industries, global industries now, that have capabilities of this technology, and they have made a science out of what Bernays did. Merging, it's almost like we're in an immersive theater. We live in, if you're unaware of immersive theater, it's like improvisation, like Tony and Tina's wedding. You have actors, people come into a scene, and they're part of the theater. It's almost like that's what public relations has become. that they are engaging where they have players engaging in the public spaces and creating these events. You know, I mean, it sounds, even as I'm talking about it, sounds like it's going to crazy town.
Somebody told me it was the Defense Department was asking for other approaches to look at war situations, and Hollywood said, "Well, call it a theater of operations."
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know,
theater.
I think it was there's a great documentary called "Why We Fight." And it was the director was he worked at the Twin Towers during 9/11, and someone sent him, he lived in the Midwest, and they sent him his ID. He thought that he lost behind a file cabinet one day, and he said he was so moved to it that he started looking into it, and so he made this documentary, Why We Fight, and it's based on Dwight D. Eisenhower's farewell address. But
and the key moment of the Eisenhower farewell address, President Eisenhower, when he retired, warned Americans to beware of the military-industrial complex. But I've been told from Dr. Shiva again that the original draft was to beware of the military academic industrial complex, but they took that out of the final speech.
Yeah. So the Frank Capra films of World War I and World War II were propaganda films. That's why he picked it. But that same thing,
the filmmaker Frank Capra also made It's a Wonderful Life, or am I confusing?
So no, I think I may be the same. I'm not sure. Yeah. But I mean, it's certainly clear that the idea of the image, and you know, what makes me as a filmmaker, as an artist, Koshelov was a Russian filmmaker. And it's amazing the power. But he put an image up of a face, just as deadpan, and a bowl of soup. And then they asked people, well, he said, what did you think that was about? He said, oh, he looks so hungry. Elon Musk said, you know what, we don't have, when they were talking about putting chips in people's heads, he says, we don't have to. People are tethered to these devices already. And to think about consciousness, right? And how this device is an interface, and so much of the information that we have, you know, or even in engaging with our lives, it's a huge, it can be a huge distraction. And if people seek to manipulate people through information, it is a huge tool that people could use, you know. From my limited perspective, I think we have to be aware of, as human beings, communicating and being present and using common sense, which would be the gift of whatever that is, nature or life, right? To engage with the material world, right? It's hard enough for us not to BS ourselves and to learn how to be in a place where we can communicate with each other and not deceive ourselves, not in a bad or good way, but just sometimes we don't formulate information always right. You know, it's a process of growth, of as being a young human being, growing into a human being, of how to engage with the material world.